Hello everyone, it's GBPirate here. Today I'm not talking about maps, but I'm talking about my proposal to change the tournament mode to make the observer tool the absolute best observer tool in Company of Heroes history. And before I get started on what I think the right solution is, I'm just going to go through the different modes of observer mode and kind of define the different panels and windows so that we're all on the same page as I talk through my proposal and what I think the issue is. So here are the basics. It was introduced in 1.9 Orchid Spider, which released in November 2024. The function is to spectate live games with a delay or watch replays, and the tools for both are virtually identical. The observer mode has three viewing modes: the player mode, caster mode, and tournament mode. The player mode is the mode most like playing a game of Company of Heroes 3. The UI elements are identical to the player experience except for the playback panel, which is positioned approximately in the center of the screen and flush with the bottom. As you can see here, we've got the minimap on the left, playback panel in the middle, portrait on the right, and action panel on the very right hand corner. The GUC in this case has to be in the top right of the screen, unlike in the live game, which has an option to place it kind of around where the playback panel is, directly next to the minimap. The next mode is the caster mode. The caster mode augments the player mode by adding battle group and resource income panels to the top of the screen in the upper left and right. The global unit control element is adjusted to include information for one player on both teams. The lower part of the UI, all of those elements remain in place. There's also at the top of the screen this with the VP counter, we've got the unit and vehicle kills. But as you can see in the top left and right, you've got the BG resource income panels, the GUCs to the left and right, the mini-map, playback panel, portrait, and action panel down below. And the action panel is really the most important part of my proposal to revamp this, so keep that in mind. And then finally we have tournament mode. It almost entirely overhauls the UI. The minimap is smaller to accommodate additional UI elements. The GUCs are compacted into faction icons at the top of the screen, which was a suggestion from me, and the resource income battle group panels are removed from the top of the screen and placed at the bottom. The play panel is moved from the center to the lower right corner. So here we have tournament mode, and then the labels. We've got the GUCs in the top left and right, which can be expanded and kept open, but we've got the smaller minimap in the lower left and the playback panel on the lower right. We've also got three different panels that we can customize at the bottom. We've got you can use the on the lower left and highlighted in green are the arrows you use to adjust this. So you have the default battle group and resource income panel, you've got the unlock and upgrades panel, and you have the unit portrait panel, which lets you see things like veterancy, unit kills, and the health bars of the models in the unit. And before I get started in what I want to change, I just want to talk about the three reasons why you use the observer tool in the first place. The first is as a learning tool. You can watch your own losses and you can watch the best players. The second is as a casting tool. Content creators can stream or record live games, replays, or tournaments. And thirdly, as entertainment, a player can watch a replay for fun. Maybe they want to, maybe they can't play a game of Go, but maybe they want to watch a game of Go. Maybe they want to, have their dinner and drink and just watch players play and just be entertained and have the control over the cameras and whatnot, and not be at the whim of the creator casting the game or the tournament. So a lot of words here, but this is the kind of fundamental issue. The most significant detriment to tournament mode, regardless of a game's player count, is the inability to see a selected unit's portrait in an action panel at a glance. When playing and spectating in player mode and caster mode, this unit information is almost always present without the click of a button. The observer must change to player or caster mode to see a unit's action panel. This is the most egregious error because it is the panel that shows the information about unit abilities, upgrade and ability costs, and ability cooldowns. Similarly, battle group information is severely limited, with only the name of the battle group and their unlocks able to be viewed without switching to player or caster mode. There's another limitation that goes beyond the panel changes that I'll be suggesting, but I'll discuss a few other quality of life issues at the end of the video. This lack of capability is incredibly important for the three raisons d'etre of tournament mode, as a learning, casting, and an entertainment tool. To be able to utilize tournament mode without adjusting any panels or switching between modes, the observer must retain an incredible amount of information, including but not limited to unit construction time, unit upgrade time and costs, unit ability costs and cooldown, global upgrade costs and effects, battle group trees, and battle group passive and active effects, cooldowns, price, and command point cost. A player using the replay function as a learning tool will have to click several buttons to access the information that helps inform them of the capabilities of a faction or unit and the opportunity cost of player choices. A creator using the replay function as an observing tool for live or recorded casts faces a similar problem. If the commentator cannot quickly mouse over an element to show some of the important information listed above, they must either have to know that information and convey it to the observers, or click through UI elements, or worse, cycle through the three modes to see that information and return to tournament mode. How do we fix this? The key to the problem lies in the playback panel. This panel ought to be able to be replaced by the action panel either with cycling buttons or when minimizing the playback panel altogether. The functions of the playback panel can be learned or replaced by hotkeys. A disappearing button, akin to the cinematic mode button when in caster mode, or the minimized version can hide the playback panel on the screen while still allowing the player access to it. So in this example, we've got the tournament mode, kind of the default setup with the battle group and resource icons below, with the action panel on the lower right hand side of the screen, where it is normally. Why can we hide the playback panel? I think for the learner and creator, it's unnecessary to always have the playback panel open. For important functions in the moment, such as limiting the fog of war view to one team, a memorized hotkey can suffice. It is always more important to have the information conveyed in the action panel than the playback panel open or minimized. To be able to quickly hover the mouse over an icon to see the information is incredibly beneficial to the learner and the creator and their audience. The action panel also shows the cooldown of ability, so sometimes you might be wondering, oh, why is a player not activating this? And in the tournament mode as it is, you'd have no idea why they're not able to activate it. But you might be able to see that the cooldown has another 10, 20, 30 seconds left before it can be utilized again. For viewers even with minimal game knowledge, being able to quickly see this information when the commentator shows it on screen aids in their understanding and enjoyment of the video, live stream, or event. Now there may be a technical limitation here that prevents displaying the action panel of a unit that doesn't belong to a player selected in the playback panel. In this example, you can see I have my name selected in the playback panel down below, and even though in the caster mode on the top left, I have my teammate here selected, I have his unit selected, but only the upgrades are showing for some reason, but only when I change in the playback panel to this player will the actual icons and abilities show up. So this may be a technical limitation on Relic's end, which would require some other changes, but I just wanted to make everyone aware that this is a potential limitation, and also to show what I'm talking about. So we have to show the unit portrait and action panel in tournament mode. If the action panel from a selected unit will be shown in tournament mode without other changes, how can the observer know which unit they have selected? It would still be inconvenient to force the observer to adjust the panels using the buttons under the minimap. In 1v1, it would be possible to use the extra space in the bottom to place the portrait panels next to the battle group and resource panels as shown below. Additionally, there would have to be some way of highlighting the correct portrait, which this isn't shown in the subsequent examples, but it is another issue to consider because you'll have two portrait modes active at once. So in this case, we have the battle group resource icon with the portrait and the battle group and resource panel with the portrait. In this scenario, we have the portraits in the center with the battle group resource panels on the outer edges. And this scenario is just flipped, with the center having the BG and resource panels and the portraits on the left and right side. But again, if you have one unit selected other than on the screen in the UI, or on the screen on the map, you have the unit highlighted. But in the portrait panels in the lower left and right, we don't have an indication of which unit is actually selected, and both are displaying. So that could be a cause for confusion, especially when we have 4 players displayed at once. So we need to show the action panel with the battle group and resource and unit portrait panels in team games. How do we do this? We can't do it in 1v1 mode because there's 4 players minimum. But the obvious solution would be to add the portrait panels over or potentially under the battle group and resource panels, like so. So you can see I've stacked the unit portrait panels on top of the battle group and resource panels, and we have all the information we kind of need sans the action panel here in this mockup. Now we can combine the unit portrait and action panels in tournament mode. We can save a little bit of vertical space here by moving the portrait panel lower and moving the player name and selector drop-down menu from the BG resource panel to the horizontal space that the player name in the portrait panel occupies, giving this result. So we've actually significantly reduced the vertical space here by moving the the player selector from above the resources just next to the portraits. And here in this mockup, I've added the action panel here so you can get an idea of what it might look like in a 2 versus 2 setting. And then the finishing touch is the playback panel. We can minimize this if we want to keep it there permanently. We can put it right over the HQ, the headquarters building selectors, the base building selectors. And this is what I call the new tournament mode. I'd even like to see the ability to turn off at the top the unit kill counter. But basically you've got everything here. You've got the mini map, you've got portraits of the units, which lets you see veterancy, lets you see model HP, it lets you see any upgrades, it lets you see temporary effects such as the Panzer Pioneer Squad, the little green half track. It shows you the combined arms ability, and thankfully with the new tooltip changes, it also shows you exactly what benefits the unit is getting from that ability. It also shows us the resources for the 4 selected players, which in this 2v2 scenario is every player. And it also shows you the battle group that the players have selected and any battle group abilities they've unlocked already. And then also the action panel, of course, super important because that has all the unit ability costs, and I've already gone into that. Now, here's an example with the battle card open, the battle group card open. About the same spot a player would see it, and it is reduced in size by 25% just to compensate for the amount of UI. If this was 100%, it would take up a lot more of the screen, and it might be a little too jarring. But this is just a 25% reduction for the old Indian Artillery Battle Group. Yeah, and then just a little refinement here. So tournament mode, as I mentioned before, it shrinks the minimap by about 30%. And in this mockup I'll show you, I increase the tactical map by 30% and reduce the action panel by about 25%. So you can see here the tactical map is now a lot larger, but everything is kind of shifted over slightly, and the action panel is a lot smaller, but I think still readable and still accessible. The icons are still clear enough on my kind of standard size 1440p monitor. I don't have an ultra wide or anything fancy like that. So this is essentially the new tournament mode I'm proposing here. We've got all the information we need, and we don't even have to, we could cycle between, the other panel in the tournament mode, of course, is the unit, the global upgrade screen. But I think that is maybe less relevant, and you can kind of click on that and see, what's the timing for this upgrade, for that upgrade. But that's more of a, that's something you don't check very often. You don't need to see that all the time. And just by cycling that panel, it's a useful panel, but cycling that panel doesn't change between tournament and caster and player mode, so it's not super disruptive. Yeah, so this is just, why the new tournament mode. I just went over this. For 4 players, you basically don't need to click anything once you have everything set up the way you want. For 6 and 8 player modes, the only thing the observer has to do is change the player owner of the bottom panels, which can be done either via drop-down menu or kind of a button to cycle through them. And then I've got 4 potential 1v1 layouts with the new tournament mode, and they're all kind of similar before what I showed the different mockups. They're all kind of in the same vein. So here we've got, well, just note, as I said before, the tactical map and action panel aren't resized in these, so it's still the smaller tac map. But we've got the portraits in the center, and then here we have the portraits to the left and right. Here we have the portraits just on the right side and the portraits just on the left side. So there's some options we can do. I'm not sure what's best, but it's a potential thing to consider here. When it comes to UI UX design. And then here are the 4 kind of in composite to see the differences here. 1v1 just has this, I don't want the changes to be just for 1v1 because I think even though it would be easier with the extra space just to kind of slap the other panels down there, I think still combining these portrait and resource battle group panels together will make the viewing experience for everyone much better. Team games or 1v1 doesn't matter. And then these are the 4 kind of quality of life changes. How can we make the new tournament mode the best observer tool? 1 is allow battle group icons and unlocks in the battle group resource panel to open the battle group card and tooltips. The tooltips should show the cost of the unit or global ability, which I think is also not present in the live game. You actually have to unlock the thing first to see its costs. So that's not necessarily a observer tool only thing, but it's another thing for Relic to consider. Second change is allow the action panel to show any unit's abilities regardless of which player is selected in the playback panel. This goes back to what I showed before, where I had my teammate not selected in the playback panel, but I had my teammate's unit selected, but it didn't show the abilities of the unit, which is a potential technical limitation, but nonetheless it's an issue. Another thing to consider, like I mentioned before, is that you need to have some way of showing which unit portrait is selected. So you can, even though when you have the unit selected on screen, it's highlighted. But if you go off screen, you may not be sure which unit you have selected anymore. So having a little highlight or something in that portrait or around the whole entire panel would be great. I think you could have a button instead of a drop-down menu to toggle between players in the same team. So instead of having to, click once and then showing the drop-down menu and then clicking the player you want, just having a little cycle would be great. Because in 3 versus 3, there's only one other choice you need for each panel. And then in 4 versus 4, having that cycle I think would just be easier. So you can, have player 1 and 2 or player 1 and 3 or player 1 and 4 selected, or player 2 and 4, 2 and 3, etc. But also it's maybe in 4v4 it might be less clicks overall to have that drop down menu. I still think a button just to cycle it would be a lot easier and kind of disruptive to the UI, because you just click and you see, okay, is that the player I want? Yes or no, by the color or the name. You don't have to click and move your mouse precisely in selecting in the menu. And then 4, I think we could have more hotkeys, so there's less mouse clicks and disruptions to the UI in general. You can have fog of war cycling between selected player only, all players versus all. And I think selected player only is also just team in Beyond 1v1. You should be able to switch or cycle through players in the playback panel to change the announcer voice, especially if that's a technical limitation. I don't know if this is in Code 3, I think it was in Code 2, but you could automatically switch the player of the currently selected unit. This is important, especially if there is that limitation that I've, mentioned many times already. I'd like an option to open or minimize all GUCs in the tournament mode, and then also a variation of this is to open all GUCs of selected players and or close all the GUCs of deselected players, especially for 3s and 4s. Maybe you want to you could even have a button to kind of switch everything all at once. So you switch all the lower panels to, you might see player 1, 2, 5, 6, team 1, team 2, and then switch to players 3, 4, 7, 8 down below, and then also switch the GUCs open just kind of automatically with one button click. I think that could be a great thing to do, and also especially in certain maps where you might have kind of 2v2s happening, it'll kind of let you see, okay, on this half of the map what's going on, and then you just with one click of the button instantly switch, and then all of a sudden, okay, we're seeing what's happening on this side of the map. And that's all, folks. I will put some screenshots and stuff in Discord and also link this video. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. What do you think? Is there something I've overlooked? Are there other issues with observer mode that you think I didn't bring up? Is something unclear? Like, ask me questions. I know it's a lot of talking, just monologuing straight to the camera, but I hope the slideshow really helped show you all what I'm talking about. Anyway, thanks everyone, and remember, like and subscribe, and join the World Builders Discord to stay up to date on the community cartography competition, the CCC, which is ongoing. Thanks everyone. Take care.